The hardest truths are often guarded by those who cannot speak. Nathan Brooks has spent years believing that silence can heal almost anything. After retiring from the United States Army, he trades crowded highways for winding mountain roads and restless nights for quiet mornings beneath endless skies. His small log cabin sits near the edge of an old farming valley in western Montana, where abandoned fields slowly surrender to wild grasses and towering cottonwood trees. Every sunrise begins the same way. Fresh coffee steams from a weathered metal mug while cool mountain air carries the scent of pine, damp earth, and distant cedar across the porch. Beside him waits Ranger, a 13-year-old German shepherd whose black and tan coat has faded around the muzzle into soft shades of silver. Age has slowed the faithful dog, but it has never stolen the sharp intelligence behind his warm brown eyes. They have shared nearly every day together since Nathan adopted him after leaving military service. They rarely need words anymore. One quiet glance is often enough. That autumn morning begins like countless others. Nathan shoulders a worn backpack, checks the water bottle clipped to the side, and whistles softly. Ranger rises immediately, stretching stiff joints before following his owner down the narrow forest trail. Golden leaves drift lazily through crisp October air while sunlight filters between ancient pine branches, painting moving patterns across the ground. Squirrels dart between fallen logs. A distant hawk circles above the valley. Everything feels wonderfully ordinary. They walk nearly 2 miles before the trail bends toward an overgrown meadow that Nathan has never explored closely. Decades earlier, the land belonged to a farming family, but now only scattered fence posts remain, leaning quietly beneath vines and moss. Nature has reclaimed nearly every sign that people once lived there. Ranger suddenly stops. His ears lift. His posture changes completely. Nathan notices the shift immediately because it is unlike anything he has seen in months. The old German shepherd is no longer wandering peacefully beside him. He stares across the tall grass toward a cluster of aging oak trees where something hidden waits beyond the weeds. Nathan quietly calls his name. Ranger does not move. Instead, the dog walks forward with slow determination, never taking his eyes from the distant clearing. Curious, Nathan follows. The grass grows waist-high before opening into a forgotten patch of level ground surrounded by weathered stone walls almost swallowed by climbing ivy. At the center stands an old circular well built from rough granite blocks darkened by countless seasons of rain and snow. Its wooden roof collapsed long ago, leaving only the stone ring standing beneath the open sky. Nathan approaches carefully. The well appears completely abandoned. No fresh footprints disturb the earth. No tire tracks reach this isolated place. The silence feels unusually deep, broken only by the gentle rustling of dry leaves overhead. Ranger walks directly to the edge of the well and quietly sits. He does not bark. He does not whine. He simply stares into the darkness below with complete focus. Nathan kneels beside him and peers over the stone rim. Cool air rises from inside the shaft. Far below, sunlight reveals nothing except dry stone walls disappearing into shadow. There is no water, no trapped animal, no movement of any kind. Nathan smiles gently and pats Ranger's shoulder. "Come on, old friend," he says softly. "There is nothing here." Ranger does not even glance back. The faithful German shepherd remains perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the empty well as though he is waiting for someone who has been gone for a very long time. Ranger remains motionless beside the weathered stone, while long after Nathan Brooks expects curiosity to fade. The old German shepherd has always trusted his owner's voice without hesitation, yet today something feels different. Nathan calls softly once more, then gently taps his leg in the familiar signal that has guided hundreds of peaceful hikes through these mountains. Ranger slowly turns his head, meeting Nathan's eyes for only a brief moment before looking back into the empty shaft. There is no fear in his expression, no excitement either, only quiet certainty. Nathan steps closer and carefully examines the old well again. The granite stones are covered with pale green moss that has grown undisturbed for decades. Small vines spill over the rim, while tiny yellow wildflowers bloom between cracks where nature has patiently reclaimed forgotten craftsmanship. Leaning cautiously over the edge, Nathan allows his eyes to adjust to the darkness below. The shaft appears completely dry. Sunlight reaches only the upper portion of the stone walls before disappearing into cool shadows farther down. He picks up a small pebble and drops it gently. A few seconds later, the faint sound of stone striking stone echoes upward before silence settles once again. There is no splash, no rustling, no hidden movement waiting beneath. Satisfied that nothing living needs help, Nathan smiles quietly and reaches for Ranger's collar. The old dog rises without resistance, but after only 3 slow steps, he calmly stops, slips free of Nathan's gentle guidance, and returns to exactly the same place beside the well. Nathan watches with growing curiosity. During 13 years together, Ranger has never behaved this way. The veteran kneels beside him again, resting one hand on the dog's broad shoulder, while cool autumn wind carries the scent of fallen leaves across the abandoned meadow. Beyond the clearing, weathered fence posts lean toward the earth beneath climbing ivy. Fragments of broken stone walls emerge from waist-high grass, hinting that this forgotten place was once a thriving farm where children may have laughed, families gathered for supper, and hard-working hands built lives one season at a time. Everything now feels wrapped in peaceful silence, yet not the empty kind. It is the silence of a place that still remembers. Nathan studies the ground surrounding the well with practiced attention. Years of military service taught him to notice details that others often overlook. The earth is firm, undisturbed by recent footprints. Fallen oak leaves have gathered naturally around the stone base. There are no signs of trespassers, no abandoned equipment, no evidence that anyone has visited this clearing in a very long time. Even so, Ranger continues watching the darkness below with unwavering focus. As afternoon sunlight begins shifting across the meadow, Nathan reluctantly decides it is time to return home. He gives Ranger one final quiet command. This time the German shepherd obeys, but only after lingering beside the well for several long seconds. They walk back through the forest beneath glowing branches painted with gold and crimson leaves. Ranger remains unusually quiet during the entire hike, never chasing squirrels or pausing to investigate familiar scents along the trail. That evening, while rain taps gently against the cabin windows and firelight flickers across the stone fireplace, Nathan notices Ranger lying near the front door instead of his usual place by the hearth. The old dog keeps lifting his head whenever wind brushes through the trees outside, as though listening for something too distant for human ears. The following morning, before Nathan even reaches for his hiking boots, Ranger is already waiting at the door with calm determination shining in his warm brown eyes. Without making a sound, the faithful German shepherd looks toward the forest, and Nathan realizes there is only one place his companion wants to go. Nathan Brooks does not question Ranger the next morning. Experience has taught him that loyalty often notices details long before reason catches up. The mountain air feels colder as they return to the forgotten meadow, where silver mist drifts slowly across the tall grass, and early sunlight slips between the branches of ancient oak trees. Every sound seems softened by the quiet. A pair of bluebirds flutters across the clearing before disappearing into the forest, while dry leaves roll gently across the weathered stones surrounding the old well. Ranger walks with steady purpose, never hesitating, never looking anywhere except the place that has captured his complete attention. As soon as they arrive, the old German shepherd quietly sits beside the stone rim exactly where he had been the day before. Nathan removes his backpack and begins exploring the abandoned property more carefully than before. Beyond the well, he notices the remains of a crumbling stone foundation nearly hidden beneath vines and waist-high weeds. Broken sections of wooden fencing lean against young maple trees that have grown where a barn may once have stood. Rusted hinges lie half-buried beneath layers of fallen leaves, and fragments of old brick peek through patches of moss. The entire meadow feels less like an abandoned field and more like the memory of a home patiently waiting beneath the passing years. Nathan slowly circles the well, studying every stone with the quiet patience that once served him well during military reconnaissance. Most of the granite blocks appear roughly shaped by hand, but one section near the eastern side catches his attention. Unlike the surrounding stones, 3 blocks display faint chisel marks forming a simple pattern almost erased by time. He kneels closer and gently brushes away dirt with his gloved hand. The carving becomes slightly clearer. It resembles a small oak tree enclosed within a circle, carefully etched into the granite by someone who wanted the symbol to last. Nathan has never seen the design before. Ranger quietly watches him without moving. A few feet away, something metallic glints beneath the morning sunlight. Nathan parts the tall grass and discovers a tarnished silver pendant attached to a broken leather cord. He lifts it carefully into his palm. One side bears the same oak tree symbol carved into the well. The opposite side carries a single engraved date, worn but still readable beneath years of weather. There is no name, no initials, only the tiny emblem and the faded year. Nathan slips the pendant into a small cloth pouch inside his backpack, believing it deserves to be protected until he understands its story. Continuing around the clearing, he notices an old stone path almost completely hidden beneath moss and wildflowers. It leads away from the well toward a cluster of towering cottonwood trees before disappearing beneath thick undergrowth. Every discovery suggests that families once walked these same stones carrying water, gathering harvests, and returning home at the end of long days. Ranger finally rises and slowly follows Nathan to the beginning of the forgotten path. For a brief moment, the old German shepherd lowers his nose to the ground, then quietly turns back toward the well instead of continuing forward. Nathan studies his companion with thoughtful curiosity. Whatever has drawn Ranger here does not seem connected to the abandoned house or the broken fences. It always returns to the well itself. Standing beneath the bright autumn sky, Nathan glances once more at the mysterious carving on the granite stones before looking toward the distant mountain town beyond the valley. Somewhere in its library, courthouse, or historical archives, someone may still remember the meaning of the oak tree symbol and the family who once called this peaceful meadow home. He gently shoulders his backpack, gives the old well one last thoughtful glance, and silently decides that tomorrow's journey will not begin in the forest, but inside the oldest records the town still keeps. Nathan Brooks arrives in the mountain town shortly after sunrise, with Ranger resting quietly in the passenger seat as golden light spills across the empty streets. The town is small enough that nearly every storefront still displays hand-painted signs, and the oldest brick building on Main Street houses both the public library and the county historical archive. Nathan parks beneath a towering maple whose leaves have turned brilliant shades of crimson, then gently scratches behind Ranger's silver ears before asking him to wait comfortably inside the truck with the windows slightly open to welcome the cool autumn breeze. The old German shepherd watches him with calm eyes, but keeps glancing toward the forested hills beyond town, as though his thoughts never truly leave the forgotten meadow. Inside the library, polished oak shelves stretch toward the ceiling, filled with decades of county records, family histories, and carefully preserved newspapers whose pages carry the faint scent of old paper and cedar. Behind the reference desk sits Margaret Sullivan, an elderly librarian whose gentle smile reflects a lifetime spent protecting local history. Nathan politely introduces himself and places the small silver pendant on the desk beside a sketch he made of the oak tree symbol carved into the granite well. Margaret adjusts her glasses and studies both objects in complete silence. Her expression slowly changes from simple curiosity to quiet recognition. She softly whispers that she has not seen that emblem in nearly 40 years. Without another word, she disappears into the archive room and returns several minutes later carrying a weathered leather binder labeled Pioneer Homesteads of Pine Valley. Together, they carefully turn brittle pages filled with faded photographs, handwritten property records, and family maps drawn by surveyors long before modern highways crossed the mountains. Near the middle of the binder, Margaret gently stops at a yellowed photograph showing a handsome stone while standing proudly beside a white farmhouse surrounded by thriving apple orchards. Nathan immediately recognizes the circular granite wall and the distinctive oak tree emblem carved into its eastern side. Beneath the photograph appears the name of the family who once owned the land, the Whitmore family. Margaret quietly explains that the Whitmores were respected farmers whose orchards supplied fruit to several neighboring counties for generations. Their property became known for the magnificent oak tree planted by the family's founder beside the well, a tree that symbolized endurance, faith, and the promise that future generations would always return home. Then, almost without warning, the family vanished from local life. Heavy flooding destroyed the only wagon road connecting the farm to town, followed by harsh winters that forced many mountain families to leave their land behind. Records show the property was abandoned, but no document explains what happened to the personal belongings that remained there. Nathan listens carefully while turning another page. Inside rests a hand-drawn survey map, remarkably similar to the meadow he explored with Ranger. The old farmhouse, the orchard, the stone path, and the well all appear exactly where they still stand today beneath years of overgrowth. One detail immediately captures his attention. Next to the drawing of the well, someone has written a single handwritten note inside the margin. Storage chamber concealed beneath eastern wall. Nathan slowly reads the sentence again, making certain he has not misunderstood. Margaret leans closer, equally surprised. She admits she has never noticed the note before despite cataloging the binder many times over the years. Nathan carefully closes the book and slips the silver pendant back into his pocket. Through the front window of the library, he can see Ranger sitting quietly inside the truck, patiently watching the distant mountains with unwavering calm. At that moment, Nathan realizes the old German shepherd had never been asking him to look into the empty well. Ranger had been patiently waiting for him to discover what had been hidden beneath it all along. Nathan Brooks returns to the forgotten meadow early the following morning carrying only what he truly needs: a flashlight, a length of sturdy climbing rope, heavy work gloves, a compact inspection mirror, and the quiet patience that years of military service have taught him to value above every other tool. Ranger walks beside him without pulling ahead this time. The old German shepherd seems calmer than before, as though simply knowing Nathan now understands where to look has eased the silent burden he has carried. Gentle fog hangs low across the abandoned fields while sunlight slowly pushes through the tops of towering cottonwood trees. Every blade of grass sparkles with tiny drops of dew, and the cool air carries the clean scent of wet earth and fallen leaves. Reaching the well, Nathan carefully studies the eastern wall where the faded oak tree symbol has weathered countless seasons. He runs his gloved fingertips across the granite until he notices something almost impossible to see from above. One stone block sits slightly deeper than the others, leaving a narrow shadow line no wider than the edge of a coin. Kneeling beside the opening, he uses the inspection mirror to reflect sunlight into the gap. Deep inside, a small iron ring catches the light for only an instant before disappearing back into darkness. Nathan breathes slowly, knowing he has found exactly what the old survey notes described. Rather than forcing anything, he spends nearly an hour gently clearing packed soil, loose moss, and tangled roots that have slowly covered the hidden mechanism over many decades. Ranger never leaves his side. The faithful German shepherd quietly watches every careful movement, occasionally lifting his nose toward the breeze before settling once more beside the ancient stones. At last, Nathan slips 2 fingers through the rusted iron ring and applies slow, steady pressure. Nothing happens at first. Then a faint grinding sound rises from deep within the masonry as a narrow granite panel shifts inward only a few inches. Cool air flows gently from the hidden opening, carrying the unmistakable scent of aged cedar instead of damp earth. Nathan waits several moments before shining his flashlight through the narrow passage. The beam reveals a carefully built stone chamber extending beneath the eastern side of the well, completely separate from the dry shaft itself. Everything inside appears astonishingly undisturbed. There is no treasure, no valuables, and nothing sensational waiting beneath the old farm. Resting upon a raised stone shelf sits a beautifully crafted cedar chest wrapped inside layers of faded oilcloth that have protected it from moisture for generations. Beside it rests a small leather-bound journal, several rolled maps secured with blue ribbon, a framed family photograph, and a neatly folded American flag preserved inside a protective cloth covering. Nathan feels an unexpected tightness in his chest. Whoever built this chamber had never intended to hide wealth. They had hidden memory. With the greatest care, he reaches inside and gently lifts the cedar chest into the morning sunlight before returning for the remaining keepsakes one by one. Every object is handled with quiet respect, placed upon a clean wool blanket spread across the grass beneath a nearby oak tree. Ranger slowly walks over and sits beside the blanket without touching a single item. His warm brown eyes rest upon the weathered cedar chest with peaceful certainty, and for the first time since this journey began, he softly exhales and lowers himself onto the grass. Nathan notices the subtle change immediately. The old German shepherd no longer stares into the darkness below the well. Whatever had silently called him here has finally been brought back into the light, and Nathan gently places his hand upon the cedar lid before releasing the worn brass latch, knowing the first page of someone else's forgotten story is finally ready to be read. Nathan Brooks does not open the cedar chest immediately. Instead, he sits quietly beneath the old oak tree while cool autumn wind moves gently through the branches overhead, allowing the weight of the moment to settle before disturbing memories that someone carefully protected for generations. Ranger lies beside him with his silver muzzle resting across his front paws, no longer staring toward the empty well, but watching Nathan with calm, trusting eyes. Sunlight filters through golden leaves, warming the weathered wood of the cedar chest until its rich grain glows softly against the wool blanket. Nathan slowly lifts the brass latch. It opens with surprising ease, followed by the faint scent of aged cedar and old paper preserved far better than he ever imagined possible. Inside, every item has been carefully wrapped in oilcloth and tied with faded blue ribbon. At the very top rests a handwritten note folded with remarkable precision. Nathan unfolds it carefully. The elegant handwriting begins with a simple request. If these memories are ever found, please return them to our family before they become strangers to their own story. Nathan quietly lowers the letter for a moment, absorbing the gentle humility of those words before continuing. Beneath the note lie dozens of carefully preserved family photographs. One by one, faces emerge from another lifetime. Children standing proudly beside baskets of apples. Parents smiling in front of the white farmhouse that once overlooked the meadow. Grandparents gathered around the stone well during harvest season. Every photograph captures ordinary moments, yet together they preserve an entire life that history almost erased. Nathan notices something else immediately. Nearly every photograph includes a German shepherd standing beside the family. Some are young puppies chasing children across the grass. Others are mature dogs sitting faithfully near the porch or accompanying farmers through the orchards. Their markings, proud ears, and calm expressions closely resemble Ranger. Nathan glances toward his faithful companion and quietly smiles, understanding that loyalty has long been woven into the story of this land. Beneath the photographs rests a leather-bound journal whose edges have softened with age, but whose pages remain remarkably intact. Nathan carefully opens the cover. The first entries describe ordinary farm life filled with gratitude for changing seasons, healthy harvests, and evenings shared around the family table. As the pages continue, the writing begins mentioning increasingly severe mountain storms that damaged bridges, washed away roads, and isolated nearby farms from the outside world. One final entry, written with steady determination rather than fear, explains the family's difficult decision. They believed they would return as soon as the roads reopened. Until then, they placed their most treasured memories beneath the well because stone and cedar would protect them better than hurried travel through dangerous mountain passes. Nathan gently closes the journal before emotion can rush ahead of understanding. The final item inside the chest is a folded county property deed accompanied by a carefully drawn family tree extending across several generations. Many names continue beyond the years when the farm was abandoned, suggesting descendants may still be living somewhere beyond these mountains. Ranger quietly rises and walks to the edge of the meadow where morning sunlight stretches across the forgotten orchard. He pauses only briefly before looking back toward Nathan, his calm eyes reflecting neither excitement nor urgency. There is only peaceful assurance. Nathan slips the deed, the family tree, and the first letter into protective folders before carefully returning every photograph and journal to the cedar chest exactly as he found them. As he secures the brass latch once more, he realizes this discovery was never meant to remain hidden inside a forgotten chamber forever. Somewhere beyond the valley, people are living ordinary lives without knowing that the heart of their family's history has been waiting patiently beneath an old stone well, guarded not by locks or walls, but by time, quiet faith, and one loyal German shepherd who refused to walk away. Nathan Brooks spends the next several evenings seated at the sturdy wooden table inside his mountain cabin, while the cedar chest rests beneath the warm glow of an old brass lamp. Outside, autumn rain taps softly against the windows as the wind moves through towering pines. But inside, the only sounds are the quiet turning of fragile pages and the steady breathing of Ranger sleeping peacefully beside the stone fireplace. Nathan carefully organizes every document into protective folders, photographing each page before placing it safely back inside the chest. The family tree proves to be the greatest gift of all. Although several branches end with faded ink and unanswered questions, enough names remain to follow the Whitmore family across generations. Margaret Sullivan eagerly helps him search county archives, census records, church registries, and historical newspapers preserved both on paper and in digital collections. Together, they slowly rebuild a family history that time had scattered across several states. Nathan discovers that some descendants settled in Idaho after the mountain road disappeared beneath landslides. Others eventually moved to Wyoming and Colorado in search of work, carrying only a few stories about a beautiful farm with a stone well that older relatives always believed they would someday see again. One quiet afternoon, Nathan begins writing personal letters instead of sending unexpected packages. He explains who he is, how Ranger led him to the abandoned farm, and how a hidden chamber beneath the old well protected the Whitmore family's memories for decades. He includes carefully printed copies of several photographs and the oak tree emblem, but keeps every original safely stored until their rightful owners can decide what should happen next. After sealing the final envelope, Nathan walks to the small post office at the center of town. Ranger follows close beside him, his slow but steady steps drawing friendly smiles from neighbors who know the old German shepherd by name. Nathan drops each letter into the blue mailbox without expecting a quick response. Some families lose contact not only with places but also with their own history, and he understands that trust cannot be rushed. For days later, just after sunrise, the telephone rings inside the cabin. Nathan answers quietly, and a gentle voice introduces herself as Claire Whitmore from Boise, Idaho. She explains that her grandmother often spoke about an old mountain farm with a stone well marked by an oak tree, but everyone believed the property had vanished forever after severe storms closed the only road leading to it. Nathan carefully describes the abandoned meadow, the weathered foundation, and the hidden cedar chest. Silence fills the line before Claire softly begins to cry. She tells Nathan that her grandmother kept drawing the same oak tree symbol in the margins of birthday cards until the very end of her life, saying it reminded her that home was never measured by distance. Before the conversation ends, Claire asks whether the old well is still standing. Nathan smiles gently, while looking toward Ranger resting peacefully near the porch. He answers with complete certainty that the well is still there and waiting just as patiently as it always has. During the following week, more telephone calls arrive from distant relatives living across the western United States. Every conversation uncovers another forgotten memory, another familiar face recognized in faded photographs, another story that suddenly becomes real again. Throughout each call, Ranger quietly remains beside Nathan, lifting his silver muzzle whenever another member of the Whitmore family speaks about the old farm. Late one peaceful evening, after the final call ends, Nathan steps onto the porch beneath a sky filled with bright autumn stars. Ranger joins him, gazing calmly toward the dark outline of the distant mountains. Nathan gently rests one hand upon the old German shepherd's shoulder and realizes that somewhere beyond those quiet ridges, an entire family has already begun the journey home without yet taking a single step. Nearly 3 weeks pass before the first reunion finally takes shape beneath the clear blue skies of late autumn. Nathan Brooks arrives at the forgotten meadow just after sunrise with the cedar chest carefully secured inside his truck and Ranger sitting quietly beside him, watching the familiar road disappear into the forest. The old German shepherd no longer seems restless. His movements have become slower, calmer, as though each step toward the abandoned farm carries the quiet certainty that something long unfinished is finally approaching its rightful ending. One by one, vehicles begin arriving along the old gravel road. Claire Whitmore is the first to step out, carrying a faded photograph that her grandmother treasured for decades. Soon afterward, Another family from Wyoming arrives with an elderly uncle who remembers hearing bedtime stories about a beautiful orchard, a stone well, and an enormous oak tree that stood at the center of the family farm. Before long, several generations stand together for the first time, connected not by recent memories, but by stories passed gently from one generation to the next. Ranger calmly greets each visitor with quiet dignity, accepting gentle hands across his silver muzzle before slowly leading the group toward the overgrown meadow without anyone asking him to move. The old path through the tall grass feels almost ceremonial beneath the warm afternoon sunlight. Dry leaves drift lazily from the oak branches overhead, while distant mountains glow beneath crystal-clear skies. As the weathered stone wall finally comes into view, every conversation fades into silence. Claire slowly walks forward until her fingertips rest against the cool granite blocks. Tears gather in her eyes before she softly whispers that her grandmother described every stone exactly as it still stands today. An elderly man removes his hat without speaking, overcome by the realization that he is standing where his father once played as a young boy. Nathan quietly spreads a clean wool blanket beneath the great oak tree before carefully placing the cedar chest upon it. He steps back without saying a word. This moment belongs entirely to the Whitmore family. Claire gently lifts the brass latch with trembling hands. The scent of aged cedar rises once again as sunlight falls across the carefully preserved letters, photographs, journals, and keepsakes waiting exactly where loving hands placed them so many years before. One faded photograph passes slowly from person to person. Smiles appear through tears as familiar faces emerge from another lifetime. Children recognize the same eyes their parents carry today. Grandparents point toward the farmhouse, the orchard, and the faithful German shepherd standing proudly beside every generation. When the leather journal is finally opened, Claire quietly begins reading aloud beneath the sheltering branches of the old oak. The final entry explains that the family hid their memories beneath the well because they believed they would return within weeks after the mountain roads reopened. They never imagined nature would separate them for generations instead of seasons. No one speaks after the last sentence is read. Even the children remain still, listening to the gentle wind moving through the leaves above them. Nearby, Ranger slowly walks to the edge of the stone well for what seems like one final visit. He looks quietly into the dry shaft for several peaceful moments before turning away without hesitation. Instead of sitting beside the well as he had every day since discovering it, the old German shepherd walks back to the gathering beneath the oak tree and peacefully lies beside Claire's young grandson. The child instinctively wraps one arm around Ranger's broad neck while continuing to study the old family photographs. Nathan notices the small change immediately. The faithful dog who once refused to leave the empty well no longer feels drawn toward its silent depths. Whatever promise had patiently waited beneath those ancient stones has finally found the family it was always meant to reach. The morning after the reunion, the forgotten meadow no longer feels abandoned. Fresh footprints cross the tall grass where silence had ruled for decades, and the old stone well stands beneath the great oak tree with a quiet dignity that seems almost renewed. Nathan Brooks arrives carrying a thermos of fresh coffee while Ranger walks comfortably beside him, his steady pace matching the gentle rhythm of the cool autumn morning. The Whitmore family has already gathered around a folding table covered with carefully organized photographs, journals, maps, and handwritten letters. Children quietly color sketches of the old farmhouse, while grandparents compare names from the family tree, discovering connections that had faded from memory long before they were born. Claire Whitmore gently opens the leather journal once again, determined to read every remaining page. The later entries reveal details that no family story had preserved. They describe the relentless mountain storms that washed away the only wagon road leading through the valley, leaving the farm isolated for months at a time. Supplies became difficult to replace. Neighbors could no longer reach one another, and the family eventually accepted an invitation to stay temporarily with relatives beyond the mountains until safer roads could be built. Before leaving, they carefully stored their journals, photographs, legal papers, and treasured keepsakes beneath the well because they believed stone walls and cedar would preserve them better than an uncertain journey through flooded passes. Every page carries the same hopeful promise. "We will return when the road returns." Nathan quietly watches as Claire finishes reading the final paragraph. No tragedy had forced the family away forever. No mystery had stolen their home. Life had simply moved faster than expectation. Seasons became years. Years became generations. And the promise to return slowly dissolved beneath the weight of time until only scattered memories remained. An elderly Whitmore relative gently unfolds one of the survey maps recovered from the hidden chamber. Comparing it with modern county records, he discovers that the original property boundaries still exist, although the land has remained untouched for decades. Margaret Sullivan arrives shortly afterward carrying copies of historical documents from the county archive, confirming every detail found inside the cedar chest. Together they realize that the hidden chamber beneath the eastern wall had been designed specifically to preserve family history during long mountain winters. It had never been a secret vault. It had always been a time capsule built with faith instead of fear. Ranger quietly wanders toward the edge of the former orchard where several aging apple trees still survive beneath years of wild growth. One small branch unexpectedly carries a handful of bright red apples despite decades without care. Claire smiles through grateful tears as she gently picks one and remembers hearing her grandmother describe fruit that tasted sweeter because every harvest was shared with neighbors before it was sold. The simple memory spreads from one family member to another until laughter replaces silence beneath the old oak tree. Nathan steps back, allowing the family to fill the meadow with voices that once belonged there. Looking across the restored gathering, he notices something remarkable. The place itself seems different, not because the stones have changed or the trees have grown taller, but because forgotten memories have finally been spoken aloud where they were first created. Ranger slowly returns from the orchard carrying nothing except the peaceful confidence that has settled over him since the family arrived. He quietly lies beside the weathered stone well without staring into its depths, resting instead beneath warm afternoon sunlight while children play nearby and generations reconnect around stories that were never truly lost, only patiently waiting to be remembered. Over the following month, the abandoned meadow slowly transforms without losing the quiet spirit that had protected it for so many years. Nothing is rebuilt in haste. The Whitmore family agrees that the land should never become a tourist attraction or a place crowded with modern structures. Instead, they choose to honor what already exists. Every Saturday morning, relatives from several states gather with work gloves, hand tools, and grateful hearts. Nathan Brooks joins them whenever he can, arriving with Ranger riding comfortably beside him through the familiar mountain roads. The old German shepherd walks among the volunteers at an easy pace, accepting gentle smiles from children and warm greetings from adults who now consider him part of their own family history. Together they clear fallen branches from the forgotten stone path, without disturbing the wildflowers growing beside it. They carefully remove vines that have slowly covered the granite well, revealing the weathered oak tree carving exactly as it appeared generations earlier. Broken fence posts are left in place whenever possible because they tell part of the farm's story, while unstable sections are reinforced using reclaimed cedar that matches the original craftsmanship. Every decision is guided by respect rather than convenience. Margaret Sullivan visits with additional copies of historical photographs, helping everyone compare the old landscape with the meadow standing before them today. Slowly, familiar landmarks begin to emerge from beneath years of patient growth. The outline of the farmhouse foundation becomes visible once again. The original orchard rows can be traced across the gentle hillside. Several aging apple trees receive careful pruning, and to everyone's surprise, more healthy branches begin producing fruit before the first frost arrives. Claire Whitmore suggests placing a simple wooden bench beneath the great oak tree where future generations can sit together and read from the family journal. Nathan volunteers to build it by hand inside his workshop using locally harvested white oak, finishing the wood with natural oil instead of glossy varnish so it will age gracefully beside the old well. When the bench is finally carried into the meadow, Ranger quietly walks over and lies beside it as though approving its place beneath the familiar branches. Near the well, the family installs a modest bronze plaque mounted upon a natural fieldstone. The inscription is brief. It simply honors the Whitmore family, the generations who called the valley home, and the enduring belief that memories are worth preserving for those who come after us. Nathan notices that no individual names are placed above the others. Every generation stands together equally, just as the journal always intended. The cedar chest itself is entrusted to the County Historical Archive after every document is professionally preserved and digitally copied, while the original photographs rotate among family members during annual gatherings so each household may care for a small piece of their shared history. One quiet afternoon, Nathan watches children running gently through the meadow where silence once lingered alone. Their laughter drifts across the valley with the same mountain breeze that carries the scent of fresh pine and ripe apples. Ranger rests peacefully beneath the oak tree, lifting his silver muzzle only when one of the youngest children walks over to softly scratch behind his ears. Nathan realizes the old German shepherd has not approached the edge of the well in many days. Instead, he chooses to remain wherever the family gathers. Looking across the restored meadow, Nathan understands that places do not truly disappear when people leave them behind. They simply wait with remarkable patience for someone willing to remember, and sometimes the first soul to hear that quiet invitation walks on 4 faithful legs instead of 2. Winter arrives quietly across the Montana Valley, covering the forgotten meadow with a gentle blanket of fresh snow that softens every stone and branch without hiding the place beneath it. Nathan Brooks continues visiting every week, sometimes alone and sometimes with members of the Whitmore family, who now plan their weekends around the peaceful drive into the mountains. Ranger still walks beside him, although age has slowed his once effortless stride. His silver muzzle seems brighter against the white landscape, and his footsteps leave careful tracks that weave between the old stone path and the great oak tree. Nathan notices the change with both gratitude and quiet understanding. Ranger no longer leads every walk. Instead, he simply stays close, content to follow the familiar rhythm of the man who has shared nearly 13 years of faithful companionship with him. On one bright December afternoon, Claire Whitmore arrives carrying a carefully framed copy of the earliest family photograph recovered from the cedar chest. The original remains safely preserved in the historical archive, but this reproduction is meant to stay inside the small cabin built beside the restored meadow where visitors can read the family story. She places the frame upon a handcrafted wooden shelf that Nathan installed a few days earlier, then steps outside to find Ranger resting peacefully beneath the oak tree. She kneels beside him and gently runs her hand across his thick winter coat. With a quiet smile, she whispers that her grandmother always believed certain blessings arrived without announcing themselves, and perhaps this faithful old German shepherd had been one of those blessings all along. Nathan hears the words from a short distance away, but says nothing. Some thoughts become more meaningful when they are allowed to settle into silence. Later that afternoon, several children gather around the wooden bench while Nathan reads selected passages from the family journal. The youngest listeners ask thoughtful questions about the orchard, the farmhouse, and the long journey that separated generations from their home. Nathan answers patiently, reminding them that the greatest treasures hidden beneath the well were never valuable because of money. They mattered because they carried love, memory, and hope across time. The children look toward the old stone well with new understanding, seeing not an abandoned structure, but the quiet heart of an entire family's story. Ranger slowly rises and walks through the snow toward the bench, where he gently rests beside the children as though he has always belonged there. One little girl quietly places her knitted scarf around his shoulders for warmth. He accepts the unexpected gift with calm dignity, closing his eyes for a moment while everyone smiles. Nathan cannot remember the last time he saw the old German shepherd appear so completely at peace. There is no longer any searching in his eyes, no lingering glance toward hidden places beneath ancient stones. Only contentment remains. As evening approaches, the family lights several simple lanterns around the meadow instead of bright electric lights. Their warm glow reflects softly across the snow, illuminating the weathered granite well, the oak tree, and the wooden bench without disturbing the quiet beauty of the valley. Nathan stands beside Ranger, looking across the peaceful landscape that once seemed forgotten by the world. Now every familiar landmark carries new life because people have returned not to claim the land, but to remember it together. The mountain wind drifts gently through the bare branches above them, and Ranger slowly leans against Nathan's leg before closing his eyes beneath the fading winter sky, as though every promise he had silently carried to this place has finally been fulfilled. Spring quietly returns to the valley, bringing fresh green grass across the meadow and filling the old orchard with delicate white blossoms that drift through the air like tiny pieces of memory finding their way home. Snowmelt feeds the nearby streams, songbirds return to the towering cottonwood trees, and the familiar scent of pine mixes with blooming wildflowers surrounding the weathered stone well. Nathan Brooks drives the familiar mountain road with the windows open, allowing the cool morning breeze to fill the truck while Ranger rests peacefully beside him. The old German shepherd moves more slowly now, his silver muzzle brighter than ever beneath the gentle sunlight, yet his eyes remain calm and full of quiet understanding. When they reach the meadow, several members of the Whitmore family are already there preparing for what has become their first official annual homecoming gathering. Long wooden tables stand beneath the great oak tree, covered with homemade bread, fresh apple preserves prepared from the orchard's renewed harvest, family recipes carefully written onto new cards, and framed copies of the recovered photographs that now belong to every generation instead of remaining forgotten beneath stone. Children help arrange folding chairs while grandparents gently dust the wooden bench Nathan built by hand. Laughter moves naturally through the valley without overpowering its peaceful silence. Claire Whitmore carries the family journal to the bench and invites the youngest children to sit beside her. Rather than reading every page herself, she asks each child to read a short paragraph aloud. Young voices carefully speak words written by ancestors they never had the chance to meet, yet every sentence somehow feels familiar. The children ask thoughtful questions about courage, patience, and why someone would hide memories instead of taking them away. Claire smiles warmly before explaining that some things become too precious to risk losing, and sometimes protecting them means trusting that good people will one day finish the journey you cannot complete yourself. Nathan quietly listens from a short distance while Ranger settles beneath the bench, perfectly content to remain surrounded by the family he unknowingly reunited. Throughout the afternoon, relatives begin sharing their own photographs taken since rediscovering the farm. New family portraits now include the stone well, the oak tree, the restored orchard, and one faithful German shepherd who appears in nearly every picture without anyone asking him to pose. Margaret Sullivan announces that the County Historical Archive has completed preserving every document recovered from the cedar chest, ensuring future generations will always have access to the original family history. The news is greeted not with applause, but with grateful silence, because everyone understands that the greatest victory is not recognition, but preservation. Before sunset, the Whitmore family plants several young oak saplings around the edge of the meadow. Each child gently places a handful of soil around one tree, while an older relative quietly shares the name of an ancestor whose story might otherwise have disappeared forever. Nathan helps straighten the final sapling before stepping back beside Ranger. Together, they watch the new trees standing beneath the same sky that once watched over the original family generations. Warm evening light settles across the valley, turning the old granite well golden once again. Ranger slowly rises and walks one final circle through the meadow, greeting familiar faces before returning to Nathan's side, without once looking toward the darkness beneath the ancient stones. His journey has never truly been about the well itself. It has always been about the people who belonged above it. As the first stars begin appearing over the mountains, Nathan realizes the meadow is no longer a forgotten place waiting to be discovered. It has become exactly what the Whitmore family hoped it would always remain, a home, where memory, gratitude, and quiet love continue growing together with every passing season. Several months pass before Nathan Brooks realizes he has stopped thinking of the restored meadow as someone else's place. It has quietly become part of his own journey, just as naturally as Ranger has become part of the Whitmore family's story. Summer spreads across the Montana Valley with endless blue skies, tall green grass, and warm sunlight dancing across the weathered stones of the old well. Wildflowers bloom beside the restored path. The young oak saplings continue reaching toward the sky, and the orchard once again produces baskets of crisp apples shared among relatives, neighbors, and visitors who arrive not to satisfy curiosity, but to honor a family whose memories were given back to them through unexpected kindness. Nathan and Ranger continue their weekly walks, although they no longer begin with unanswered questions. They simply enjoy the quiet beauty of the valley together. Ranger moves carefully now, his steps slower than ever, but every morning he still waits patiently beside the cabin door, eager to breathe the fresh mountain air. Nathan never rushes him. Some journeys deserve to unfold at the pace of gratitude. One peaceful evening, they arrive at the meadow just as golden light settles across the great oak tree. The Whitmore family has already returned home after another gathering, leaving only the gentle sound of birds preparing for sunset and the distant whisper of wind through the orchard. Nathan sits upon the wooden bench he built beneath the spreading branches, while Ranger lowers himself comfortably beside his boots. Neither of them needs to say goodbye to the place. There is no ending here, only quiet continuation. Nathan looks toward the weathered granite well that first drew Ranger's unwavering attention. It now stands surrounded by laughter remembered instead of silence forgotten. Children who once knew nothing about their family's history now visit every year. New photographs hang beside old ones. Fresh stories are written beside those preserved inside the cedar chest. The promise recorded in the final journal entry has finally been fulfilled, not by those who originally wrote the words, but by people willing to carry them across another generation. Nathan gently rests his hand upon Ranger's silver head. The faithful German shepherd closes his eyes for a brief moment before lifting them toward the valley glowing beneath the evening sun. Nathan smiles quietly as he remembers the first day Ranger refused to leave the old well. At the time it seemed like stubbornness. Now he understands it was simply unwavering loyalty to something far greater than either of them could have imagined. They remain together until the first stars appear above the mountains. The air grows cooler, carrying the familiar scent of pine, cedar, and blooming grass across the peaceful meadow. Nathan slowly rises, adjusts the strap of his worn backpack, and gently pats Ranger's shoulder. The old German shepherd stands beside him with calm confidence. Together they begin the familiar walk toward the forest trail, leaving behind neither sadness nor regret, only a place finally filled with life once again. As they disappear beneath the towering trees, the restored meadow settles into peaceful silence, the kind that no longer speaks of loneliness but of belonging. The old stone well remains exactly where it has always stood, no longer guarding forgotten memories beneath its ancient walls, because those memories now live within grateful hearts. And perhaps that is how the most meaningful miracles quietly happen. They do not change the past. They simply guide faithful souls until the past can finally find its way home.